Why the New Orleans Saints cap cut starts with releasing Derek Carr, Taysom Hill, and Cam Jordan. The backdrop is Matt Moscona. After further review, all right, everyone's favorite topic, the salary cap. Let's go ahead and listen to Matthias talk about this, and we shall react along the way like only I can do.
All that, the New Orleans Saints have their head coach, and he is Kellen Moore hiring his staff. Next up is going to be roster cuts. Saints are some $51 million over the salary cap. You all know that number, so they have work to do. And what's interesting is, to me anyway, whenever you start to look at all the NFL insiders, right, all these people who cover the NFL nationally for the big networks that are well-connected, when all of them start saying the same things, it's when you know that's rooted in some reality. Dan Graziano over at ESPN looked at the cap situation for all 32 NFL teams. With the Saints, he writes, feels like the Saints are here every year having to slash and slash just to get under the cap. Projected $50 million over the cap or so. Talks about the restructures. He notes Derek Carr and how they could save $30 million if he's a post-June 1st cut. Then also says, watch Cameron Jordan, beloved Saints, but turns 30.
So, yeah, I mean, when you start to read or listen to national insiders and they're all saying the same thing, that's usually a pretty good indicator of like what's probably going to happen. And another good indicator is usually like the 1 + 1 = 2 method of like what makes the most sense, right? Like take all of the narrative out, take all of the bias out, take all of the, the player as far as like the highlights and the career and how funny he is or cool he is or how many jerseys he sells or whatever. Take all that out and just make it as simple as possible. Like Taysom Hill is a good example. Taysom Hill, 33 years old. Taysom Hill, hurt. Taysom Hill, last year of his contract. All that stuff. And then on the other side is if you release him, you save $10 million, whatever it is. That is, like, you could go down another rabbit hole like, well, Taysom Hill's our 3rd and 1 running back. What are we going to do on remove that? Well, but Taysom Hill's the heartbeat of the team. Remove that. It's just on one side you have injured, big contract, last year of his contract. On the other side, you got saved $10 million. Pretty obvious what they're going to do. All right, it's just the easiest road, the easiest path. You can go down every player, and if you do that, usually you can kind of predict what teams will do. Same with coaches. Like you can kind of predict, like we predicted Brandon Staley was going to be the DC like a week before it happened. Everything just made sense. It lined up. It was obvious. All he had to do was get the interview. Once he took the interview, we knew it was just a matter of time. So Derek Carr, same thing. Like Derek Carr, you can say what you want about how good Carr is. You can say what you want about how good Rattler is. You can say what you want about if you like Carr or not or whatever. It's going to be a financial decision. If it makes more sense for them to extend him, move the money around, keep him on the roster, they will. If it makes more sense to cut him, save the $30 million, they will. That's it. And that's how you have to look at it.
36 in July, 1 year left on his contract, carrying a cap number of roughly $20 million. You could extend him to save some money, but that probably doesn't make sense. So could you designate him as a post-June 1st cut and save $11 million? That's what they could do.
Yeah, right there. Like those two sentences tells you all you need to know about Cam Jordan. They'll probably cut him. And then you also have to factor in like you can only do so many things. Like you can only restructure so many players. You can only designate so many players for June 1st cuts. So if you start filling in the Sudoku puzzle, it all just kind of adds up to what it's going to be. So yeah, I mean like Cam Jordan, great example of a player that I love him, absolute hero of the city, absolute. He's been fantastic for the franchise. But in the situation the Saints are in now, the downward turn of Cam's career, or where he's regressing, he's already losing snap share. Like, if you can save the money at this point, probably going to save the money.
Do there with Cameron Jordan. Then over at NFL.com, this was at NFL.com. Again, the National Football League's website, NFL.com. They post this long list of guys who could be potential cap cuts.
that killed me. NFL.com. NFL.com. The National Football League.com. The NFL's website, NFL.com. That was crazy as hell to listen to. All right, come on. I got the four. We're breaking in the video to bet on some horses. This is what life's all about.
It is also
Come on.
close up toward the inside Mallory Unbridled with perfect
Come
Dixie
on,
Lady
four.
Modiva between horses.
We got the 4 to win play show.
Has dropped back to last and just
God
Evelyn cornered
bless.
wide. 6 furlongs
The
to go.
1 is
it's
flying.
Spicy Mustard. Went to the front for Aubrey Green. Spicy Mustard.
Okay, the 4's making the move on the outside. The 4's scooting now.
Who's now second
Oh, he's
upon
on the
settling,
outside. They
going
got,
up the back of the course.
7's on the outside.
It's the speed, saving ground
All
with
right.
the rail at 7
So we got the 4 win play show.
And then to the
Mo
inside is
Diva.
Mallory
Come
Unbridled
on, Mo.
with perfect Dixie Lady between horses. Just
I mean,
makes
who
sense.
else?
3 wide
Who
has a
else
purple
in the
cap.
content
Maureen
creation
Clearly Bella
space is
at the
interrupting
back
a
of the
video
field. The
to
opening
bet
quarter
on some
covered in
horses?
25.
This is what life's all
0.04
about.
seconds.
Come on,
Making
4.
their way toward the far turn, still aiming for Spicy
Man.
Mustard, who leads just Evelyn by 3.5. It's the speed looks to gain with the rail.
And this is obviously the
Modiva
fairgrounds,
6 lengths off this leader,
by the
running
way.
in 4th.
It's a little
Then to the
cold
inside
for
is
me to
Mallory
go to the
Unbridled.
fairgrounds this weekend, but
Madeline
if it was
Woolwood,
warm, I
just
would've
makes
went.
sense. Coming up on the
Come on,
outside
4,
of
make a
Mallory
move.
Unbridled now.
Okay,
Then further
here we
back
go.
to
Now,
Aubrey
here
the
we
Gray
go.
with perfect Dixie Lady and Clearly Bella.
I think
As
I had
these
the
maiden
I think I
fillies
had the
bears
1 in a box.
Turn for home. It's Spicy Mustard.
I don't know. We're focused on the 4.
Straight and away.
Come on, right
Spicy
here.
Mustard
Go.
leads
Go.
Just Evelyn.
Go.
Coming down toward the
Go.
final furlong.
Oh.
Just Evelyn is wandering
we
about.
got kicked on the
Spicy
outside
Mustard
there.
over toward that running rail while under pressure.
That was
Just
crazy.
Evelyn has
The
come
horse
away
in
in front
second
now.
almost ran my
Quick to
horse off the
Spicy
course.
Mustard.
Go
Modiva
for it.
charging
Come
on
on,
the far
Modiva.
side. Ori
Come on.
just makes sense in instant speed. They're close to home.
Get third
With
at least.
Honeycores, it's
Get
just
third
Evelyn.
at least.
Just Evelyn.
That's not good.
And Just Evelyn wins from
That's
Ori
not
with a
good.
length to spare. Spicy Mustard third. Modiva just makes sense instant speed.
I think the 4 was about to make a move, and then that 8 swung out, and the 4 had to swing out. We got kind of cooked there. Watch what I'm talking about right here. All right, we're coming down. We're coming down here. All right, so the 4's picking up speed. Now watch the 8. Boom. The 8 swings out. The 4's got to swing out. Once that happened, it was all she wrote. Damn, so the 8-7-1. Rip.
Guys like Deebo Samuel from the 49ers. Marshawn Lattimore with Washington. I mean, that's one worth keeping an eye on because the Saints got a third-round pick for Lattimore. And as bad as New Orleans has been in these types of situations, that feels like that's highway robbery. You sent a player who was injured at the time you traded him to Washington. He was
horrific for Washington.
Junk for them this year. And respect to Marshawn Lattimore. He didn't do anything wrong in New Orleans. He was a good player for the Saints. He's just clearly on the back nine of his career.
Said this before. Defensive backs are so volatile that, I mean, like Stephon Gilmore won the Defensive Player of the Year. He got traded either the next year or the year after that, and he just kind of, I mean, it's so hard to recapture. It's such a volatile position on a per-play basis. Like the best cornerback in the NFL can be locked down one play and then get burned or embarrassed the next play. It's just a very difficult position to be super consistent, which is the same reason why I'm kind of against drafting top cornerbacks. Like I'm against drafting a cornerback in the top 10. I mean, 10's whatever, but like in the top 5, because like how good do you need a cornerback to be worth that pick? But also like how consistent can they be?
Maybe closer to the clubhouse than the turn, and might get cut after playing less than half a season in Washington and being abused in the NFC Championship game by A.J. Brown. But they also mentioned Cameron Jordan, so that's another one. So Graziano mentioned Cameron Jordan, the NFL.com website there, looking at players that could be cut, have Cam Jordan on the list. The very next player on the list could be cut, Derek Carr.
Yeah.
I mean, you start to see these commonalities that are out there. And, oh, by the way, David Onyemata also on the list as a guy that could be cut, another former Saint right there. And it's also worth noting that they do list Taysom Hill as a player that could very well be cut in this period as well. You look at, there are common underlying factors. Aging, expensive players.
Remember, in our salary cap masterclass that I did, the whole point of restructuring players and keeping players is that you want to keep your high impact players all together. And you really don't care about the financial part of it because that'll always take care of itself, whether you restructure or you move stuff around or whatever. You're way more concerned about the product and the results on the field. once that production slips, the financials don't slip, right? Because the contract is the contract. So once the production slips, it's usually all she wrote, because then there's no incentive to continue carrying that contract. There's no incentive to continue carrying that money and keeping them together, right? Which is the reason why bad teams have a lot of cap, because bad teams don't have players worth the contracts. Having a ton of cap is usually a result of drafting poorly, because you're never giving contracts to the players you draft. So it's like, it's all this dance. It's all this like this. It's like a moving engine or something, where it's all just happening, and it's very obvious, I think, of how teams use the cap, how they pay players, when they're going to cut players, when they're going to trade players, why it makes sense. So, yeah, a lot of these Saints players are unfortunately entering that, like, the kind of the disaster period where they're expensive, they're old, they're declining production, and you have a way out. Like, teams put those way outs in there for a reason. Like, when Carr signed, I remember, and the commenter, he'll remember if he watches this video, but I kept saying I thought Carr was going to get cut in year 3, because the way the contract was, it was so front-loaded, it was obvious that year 3 and year 4 were very team, like the team controlled those 2 years. And I had a ton of people in the comments, one in particular, who kept saying, like, they're not going, that it's not a team-friendly 3rd year or a team-friendly 4th year because of this, and this. But teams control, like, teams put in these outs of when they can get out of a player's contract in there for a reason. And it's so that they can have full control and flexibility to maneuver their roster and maneuver the players around. I mean, it happens in a ton of contracts in all different sports. Like, you'll see these just layered in there. Like, there was just a contract, I got to think of what it was. A contract just happened, and it's like a 5-year deal. And every single year has an out in it. So it's like, yeah, on the surface, it's a 5-year, $60 million deal, but it also could be a 1-year, $10 million deal. You know, like, it's almost like like buying a desk from IKEA or something, where it comes in like 15 different pieces. So contracts, it can absolutely get a little confusing.
If you need to get cheaper and younger, you move on from your aging expensive players. We had James Hurst on with us in hour number 1. Again, a former Saint who came to New Orleans in 2020, which was Drew Brees' last season, when they were still very actively trying to win now with Drew Brees. And I asked him if internally they were aware of the cap situation, how bad it was, if the players internally were aware of all this.
You know, not much. A lot of the times in the locker room, the cap situation was very personal to each player, because the truth of the matter is we're all competing over the same dollars in that salary cap. So, however, I do know that everyone was aware of it. Everyone was aware that it was keeping us from going out and signing, a big splash free agent signing. They knew that. And for a while there, that was okay, because we felt like we had everyone in the building at those big time important positions to get the job done. But also,
man, that's exactly, hey, that is exactly what I talked about in the salary cap masterclass. Is that if you believe that you have your group there, then you don't plan on signing a splashy free agent. Not to mention that some years there is not a splashy free agent. So that's kind of like the philosophy behind, quote unquote, kicking the can down the road, is that you're comfortable with your window. You're comfortable with the roster you have, and all you're worried about is keeping those guys there. I've been using the Bengals as an example because the Bengals are currently in that world where they believe if we have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, we got a shot, right? So they're not concerned about, like, well, we got to free up cap room so we can go get, whoever, name, whatever free agent. They're not worried about that. They're worried about how the hell do we maintain this window? How do we maintain what we have going on? And what's probably going to happen is they're probably going to franchise tag T. Higgins and then give him a long-term deal after that. Which that's a very short-term solution, but that's their mindset. So their mindset is where Mickey Loomis's mindset was 5-6 years ago, where it's like, I will mortgage a couple years down the road if it means I can keep these guys here for 2 or 3 more years and I can try and get that Super Bowl. And I'll figure out whatever down the road. But I'm not worried about blank defensive tackle coming open or blank linebacker coming open on free agency. I'm worried about my guys. I'm worried about this window right here. A lot of teams at the top operate like that.
Also, I think you've seen that shift a little bit. I think maybe the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, you've seen us missing players at those hallmark positions that are real game changers.
And it's been 4 years since you made the playoffs.
Well, I would say it's flipped, where the players that you believed were your window, those players started falling apart quicker than you expected. For example, Marshawn Lattimore kept getting hurt. For example, Ryan Ramczyk medically retired. I mean, when you're giving him a contract, you're not thinking, oh yeah, he's going to retire at whatever, however old he is. Like Cam Jordan, same thing. Like, you're not thinking he's going to rapidly decline to the point to where he can barely even be rostered. Michael Thomas, when you give him that contract, you're thinking this is the best wide receiver in the NFL. You're not thinking he'll be injured for 3 straight seasons and then be out of the NFL. That's where sometimes outside forces happen, and whether it's injury or rapid decline or whatever, and all of a sudden you're paying a premium for a below average product. And that's what happened to the Saints, is that they were paying, they believed in their core, they believed in that foundation, but the foundation started to crumble a little bit. And when that foundation started to crumble, you're invested so much into it, you're kind of stuck with it. And you're stuck with kind of a mediocre product that's giving you mediocre results. And what bailed the Saints out in 2016, 2017 was the draft class, where all of a sudden their impact players, their core, their foundation didn't matter because their young rookie players or young players were the best players on the team. Washington's a good example of that, where the core foundation didn't really matter because Jane Daniels was so good, he came in and just lifted everything up. So that's where the Saints have to do this year. That's why I keep harping on the draft. The contract stuff doesn't matter as much. The contract stuff is going to take care of itself. We will be under the cap. We will be compliant. That's irrelevant. But now you have to. The only thing that really is worth watching is Carr, because obviously if you bring back Carr, he's your starting quarterback. If you do not bring back Carr, that obviously changes the entire team. But the focus has to be replicating 2016, 2017 again in the draft class. You have got to hit on players. You have got, Mike Green from Marshall, the edge, he was mocked to the Saints in the last mock we did. And some people are like, well, yeah, he's good. He's a good player, whatever. He's got this trait, he's got this trait. That's all fine. But if you take him at 9, you have to believe that he'll be an all-pro. You have to believe not only is he good, and not only can he become good, but that he will be good right now. And he will be good immediately. And you will get a ton of impact out of him. If you're drafting a C player to be a C player, to then hopefully in a couple years develop into a B player, don't draft him. You have got to get B players now who you think can develop into an A player in a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's where the Saints are. That's how you fix the situation. That's how you fix the cap. And you kick off the next, chapter of the New Orleans Saints.
And Hurst also, and I would highly recommend you go check out this entire interview. He was fantastic today. But, he said in no uncertain terms, and I love when you can get guys who are recently finished playing, who still have an intimate awareness of the current roster, the coaching staff, the front office, not just the team they play for, but the rest of the league as well, because they're so closely removed from it. And then they'll give you candor. And that's what Hurst did today when I asked him about, is it time to hit the full reset button?
I think it's time. With the lack of success in a weak division in the past 3 seasons, with a quarterback who's on a really limiting contract for the team. We've tried the restructuring, right? We've done it, but I think it's time. You've got a new head coach who would love to establish himself and make a name for himself as a successful head coach. As an offensive guy, I'm sure he wants a new quarterback. You know, the quarterback is the hinge position right now for the Saints. There's a lot going on. They have great draft capital this year, and I think we need to utilize that and understand that this is not an easy situation for any head coach. Prime Bill Belichick could walk into the building and not necessarily have a ton of success just because of the current situation of the team and the cap structure.
I mean, you got a guy right there, and James Hurst telling you point blank, it's time.
No one is arguing that it's not time. By the way, what the hell is goodwood.com? I mean, what's going on here? Who's doing the ad sales? We had for a while it was a window company or something, and now I've got Goodwood, yourgoodwood.com, or you can call them at 225-4GOODWOOD. Are you kidding me right now? I mean, this is shocking to see. At first, I thought it was a lumber company. When I first saw the wood, and I was like, I'm not going to worry about it as a lumber company. And as he was talking, I started to look, and I was like, wait a minute. This doesn't seem like a lumber company to me. You know what I'm saying? Lumber. I just met her. So, I mean, wild situation up at 1045 headquarters.
Like, you had a young coach, commit to him, hit the reset button, and move on. It's tough to do for your veteran players when you have a limited window to win. And you know you've got only so many, not just in the Saints era, I mean, because your career is only so long. And not everybody's going to be super blessed to be drafted by the Chiefs or the Eagles in this situation where you know you're going to a really good team that's going to compete and win. The Saints are nowhere close to that right now. And the more they carry on with this charade of pretending like they're a contender, the further removed you get from actually being one.
It's like he's so close to he's so close to being on the right side of this thing. It wasn't a charade. Again, if you look at the players towards the end there, when everything started getting south to the Saints, you are looking at a super talented roster. And unless you have a crystal ball, or unless you've got a fresh sampler of Goodwood, then there's no way you could possibly have predicted what happened to a lot of these players. It's just impossible. You know, so it was a bunch of different things happening at the same time. But this whole, the new narrative that's driving me crazy is like, come on, guys, just hit the reset. Come on, guys, this is the time to hit the reset. Guys, obviously, they traded Marshawn Lattimore last year. They are cutting all of these players. Like, it's happening right now. They hired Kellen Moore. He's 36 years old. They have Brandon Staley. He's 41 years old. They have the youngest coaching staff in NFL history. They are obviously doing that. I mean, like, when they release Cam Jordan or Taysom Hill or whatever, you're going to have every single channel in the Saints multiverse is going to be like, breaking news, they released Taysom Hill. Why can you believe this? I can't. Let's talk about it. And I'm going to be sitting here like, yes, I can believe this. We talked about it 2 months ago. We knew it was going to happen. This is barely even news. You know, like, oh, they cut David Onyemata. Can you believe? Yes, I can absolutely believe that happened. I'm not doing 20 minutes on that. You know, like, all of these things are taking place. Are the Saints finally hitting the reset button? Yes, obviously. Like, yes. Are the Saints obviously moving away from the Dennis Allen era? Yes, they fired him last year. Yes. I mean, the writing's on the wall, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.